Vladimir Ilyich Lenin (1870–1924) was a Russian communist revolutionary and the first head of the Soviet Union. Born in Simbirsk, Russia, Lenin was the third of 6 children in a well-educated, middle-class family. He was a brilliant student, and after completing his studies at the University of Kazan, he became involved in revolutionary politics. In the 1890s, Lenin became a leader of the Marxist movement in Russia. He was one of the founders of the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party (RSDLP), which later split into 2 factions, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Lenin was the leader of the Bolshevik faction, which was more radical than the Mensheviks and advocated for a violent overthrow of the Tsarist government. In 1917, Lenin led the Bolsheviks in the October Revolution, which overthrew the provisional government and established the first socialist state in the world. Lenin became the head of the new government, and he began implementing policies that aimed to transform Russia from a backward, agricultural society into a modern, industrialized state. One of Lenin's most significant policies was the new economic policy NEP, which allowed for limited capitalism and private enterprise in order to stimulate the economy. Lenin also implemented a series of social and political reforms, including the establishment of universal health care and education, the legalization of abortion, and the abolition of the death penalty. Despite his achievements, Lenin's rule was marked by political repression, including the suppression of political opponents, the use of secret police, and the establishment of a one-party state. Lenin justified these measures as necessary for the survival of the socialist state in the face of external threats and internal opposition. Lenin's health began to deteriorate in the early 1920s, and he suffered a series of strokes that left him partially paralyzed. In 1924, Lenin died of a stroke at the age of 53. His body was embalmed and placed on display in a mausoleum in Moscow's Red Square, where it remains to this day. In the years after Lenin's death, his legacy was hotly debated. Some saw him as a visionary leader who had transformed Russia from a backward, feudal state into a modern, industrialized society. Others criticized his authoritarian methods and the human cost of his policies, including the millions who died in the famine that followed the implementation of collectivization. Despite the controversies surrounding his legacy, Lenin remains a towering figure in the history of communism and the socialist movement. His ideas and policies continue to be debated and contested to this day. Following the establishment of the Soviet Union, Lenin began to focus on the practical implementation of Marxist ideas in the new socialist state. He faced many challenges in this effort, including economic difficulties and political opposition from both within and outside the country. Lenin implemented a number of policies aimed at modernizing and industrializing the Soviet economy, including the new economic policy NEP in 1921, which temporarily reintroduced some elements of capitalism in order to spur economic growth. However, he faced increasing opposition from within the Communist Party to his policies, particularly from the faction led by Leon Trotsky. In 1924, Lenin suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to continue his leadership role. He began to dictate a series of notes and letters that became known as his testament, in which he expressed his concerns about the future direction of the party and the potential for abuse of power by his fellow leaders. Lenin's health continued to decline, and he died on January 21, 1924, at the age of 53. His death sparked a power struggle within the Communist Party, with Joseph Stalin emerging as the eventual leader and implementing policies that diverged significantly from those of Lenin. Despite the controversies and challenges that marked his life and legacy, Vladimir Lenin remains one of the most significant figures of the 20th century. He was instrumental in the establishment of the world's first socialist state, and his ideas continue to influence political thought and practice around the world.